okie dokie, we're going to do question 4 together now. So this is for Unit 4, General Math Skills. So what we are looking at here is they're asking us to think about all these different decimals. So what we need to think about is that when we have numbers, we have a decimal point here, and these are all our whole numbers on this side. So like the number 5, for example, is just there, and technically it's got a decimal 0 on the end, but we don't bother writing that every time because it'll look really gross and messy. So we've got whole numbers on the left and we've got decimals on the right. And when we are doing our decimal numbers, so like 0.5, we usually do put a 0 in front on that side because it just makes it a lot easier to read. 0.5 looks better than just 0.5. So when we're looking at whole and decimal numbers, it's really important that we know what each of the columns is worth. So if we start with the whole numbers, what we have is our very first column is called units, and sometimes you might hear it called ones. Then we have tens, and so that's groups of 10, and then we have hundreds, that's groups of 100, and then we have thousands and so on. Now I'm not going to go through the whole thing because we'll be there forever, but so for example the number 5,432 is written like that. Technically, like we said before, there's a decimal point and a 0. Okay. So we have the same thing happening on the other side with our decimals, but it's a little bit different. Decimals are another way of writing fractions. So what that means is that the first column is called tenths. And what this literally means is that any number in this column is out of 10 pieces. So if I have decimal 1 or 0.1, what I'm literally saying is that I have one piece out of 10. And so if we drew a picture of that, 2, 3, 4, 5 there, it's one piece coloured in out of 10 pieces altogether. And that's what we're looking at when we do tenths. Then we can have the next column, which is hundredths. And so this piece is when we have a number out of 100, and this might be, let's say, a 5 here. And what we do is we read all the numbers from the decimal to the column we're in. So this would be 15 out of 100. Okay. Then thousandths. And you'll notice that on this side, even with my messy handwriting, they've got a th on the end because it's saying it's a part of. So it's a th. So thousandths, we said. So let's say I had the number 225 thousandths. This is reading from the decimal all the way down to the thousandth. Therefore, it's 225 over 1,000. Now, a good little trick that I like to remember is if you're in the first column, you have 1 0 and it is one place. If you're in the second column, you now have 1 2, 2 zeros for 100, 2 numbers. Then if you look at thousandths, we have 3 columns, 3 zeros for 1,000, and you can have up to 3 numbers. Now, where it does get a bit confusing is I could have a 5 in my thousandths column and just fill in the gaps with zeros, and that would be 5 out of 1,000. So we still have 3 places because it's in the thousandths column. So now that you've listened to that whole thing, let's actually look at the question. Okay, so I've just written out all my numbers, and what we know is that on the left-hand side was whole numbers, right? So they are bigger than decimals. So if we wanted to put these in order, what we're going to do is we're going to read from this side across the biggest number. So let's have a look. If I look at my numbers so far, if I look at my hundreds column, I have 400, decimal 00, that is my biggest number. When we're doing descending order, we're saying